Yo, what's good, YouTube? It's Boardsy, and we are so unbelievably back. This is going to be an updated version of the ultimate all-encompassing gaming mouse tier list. Over 125 mice, lots of new additions. It's actually been 8 months since the last tier list. I try to do them every 6 months, so my bad. But yeah, in honor of the 125 plus mice, all I want in this video, 125 likes and new subscribers. So if you can help me out with that, greatly appreciated. But gonna get right into it with a classic, a staple, the first mouse every time, the Bugha Mouse and the Bugha Mouse 2, which are promptly both going to go into dog shit. There is no redeeming qualities. They're just absolute e-waste that Bugha tied his name to. And they gotta make a third one, honestly. Like, it's been a while since the second one released, and I'm interested in what they're gonna cook up. But yeah, all jokes aside, if you are looking for an actual functional, usable mouse, literally get anything on the list besides the Bugha Mice, maybe with the exception of the bloody A7 Minecraft mouse as well. But yeah, everything else leaps and bounds ahead of the Bugha Mouse. And if your parents got you one, got some bad news for you, they may not like you very much. Next up is going to be the Roccat Kone XP, and we are once again going to land in the dog shit tier. This is a mouse from Roccat that just didn't make a lot of sense. It was very Minecraft focused, lots of RGB, extremely heavy, lots of buttons. It's just like not a proper FPS mouse. You can say that's not the target audience. I don't care. I review mice for FPS, and for that it is just not a good product. The Logitech G705, the inclusive mouse, it's not going to go in dog shit, right? It's a Logitech product. It's a pretty heavy, small mouse that was designed for women and other marginalized groups, which to me doesn't make a lot of sense. No matter what race, fucking gender you are, you can use a Logitech G Pro X super light, but the G705 at $100 for what it is, it's just not worth it. So it's going to go in the D tier. Next up is going to be the SteelSeries Aerox 5, which is really just a mouse that does not move me. It feels like a pretty generic store-bought mouse. There are some extra side buttons on the side. Really dumb design, if I remember correctly. It's not egregiously overpriced, but it's just not a mouse that you're going to use and be like, whoa, this is a lot better than anything I had been using, unless you are used to pretty much dog shit. So I feel like I also kind of bullied SteelSeries out of making mice. They haven't announced anything new in a while, and their last lineup had been pretty mid. Next is going to be the Razer Basilisk V3 Pro, which is obviously Razer's take on the Logitech G502. It has a lot of features, but it's just like, again, a mouse that does not really move me for FPS. For some reason, so far, I have only talked about like these pretty heavy, just boring mice, but I can assure you it's not going to be the entirety of the tier list. But yeah, the Basilisk V3 Pro, if you're looking for a larger mouse with a lot of buttons, a lot of features, then it's probably like A tier, one of the best options out there. I would say most charitably B tier for my standards. I guess I'll leave it there. Next up is going to be the Roccat Burst Pro, which is another B tier mouse. Honestly, it should have been updated better. They made the Burst Pro Air, which is probably on this list somewhere, and that was just a really shitty rendition. It was a lot heavier than the wired version, and honestly, nobody's using the mouse now because it was just such a piss poor revamp. So whatever's happening at Roccat, kind of sad to see. Hopefully they come out with like a Kone Pure Ultra wireless. That's really the only thing I feel could save them at this point, because they've just been making some weird decisions. The OG Roccat Burst Pro wired was a really good mouse, and it just went downhill from there, in my opinion. Now we got the Xtrfy Mz1 Wireless, the creation of Rocket Jump Ninja himself. I don't know where to put this. Honestly, I have not used mine in a while. Probably does not belong in C tier. It's an interesting shape for fingertip, but again, Xtrfy needs to fucking update it. Since they got acquired by Cherry, I believe, they've just been radio silent in terms of mice. So if they gave this a solid shell, weight reduction, no RGB, just make it lighter, I think that could be a very good pro version of the mouse. It could line Rocket Jump Ninja's pockets some more, and I feel like that's what Xtrfy needs to do. But really, I would not recommend anybody to spend over $100. Next up is going to be the Xtrfy M8, which I guess will go in the bottom of B tier, and this was a mouse that, for me, I just could not get used to the shape, which is kind of rare using all of these mice. I can generally find some grip style that's going to work and be comfortable, but the way the Xtrfy M8 is set up with the buttons sloping down so aggressively, it's just a massively uncomfortable mouse, just a pretty dumb design in my opinion, and I could not get used to it. But I know there are some people that liked it. It has a 3395 sensor, and the click implementation was solid, if I recall correctly. So it's not a bad mouse, just not something I would recommend. A very out there shape, and there's a chance that you're just not going to be a fan of the low button height gimmick. The M4 Wireless, Again, similar to the Mz1, it's just a mouse that needs to be updated to 2023 standards with a newer sensor, solid shell, potentially lower weight, because just the standard M4 shape, it is polarizing, so if you are a fan of it, maybe you do want to use the wireless version. But for most people looking for a wireless ergo, it would not be even close to the top of my recommendations. The Gambition's Orbit, just by definition, a dog shit mouse. I don't know why I said by definition, it's just not a good mouse. It was a clone of like the G305 that came out in 2021, I believe, and it was really bad. It was a Kickstarter project. That's about all you need to know. The Glorious Model I. This is Glorious's take on the G502. Didn't they promise to make a wireless version called the i2? Did that like release and I just did not notice? Or have they just not come out with that yet? Well, regardless, the wired version is pretty dog shit and definitely not worth buying. Honestly, wait, where are all of the Glorious Mice? I could have just put them all in a low tier, but I'll do that later, I suppose. Now, we actually have some good mice to talk about, which is, for the first time in this video, the Razer Viper V2 Pro, Death Adder V3 Pro. It's really just like, pick your poison. These are the best wireless mice on the market in terms of specs that are readily available. There obviously is the Viper Mini Signature Edition as well, but that mouse is $300 and is available in much smaller batches. So if you're looking for a best of the best performance, very low, comfortable weights, it's just going to come down to which shape you want. If you want a low profile flat shape, or if you want a higher profile ergo shape. I'm going to be completely honest, Death Adder V3 Pro is just my main mouse nowadays. The market has been very dry recently, and I'm almost always using that or the Viper Mini Signature Edition. I'd say that if you have large hands, anything above like 20 by 10 centimeters, and you play claw grip or palm grip, the Death Adder V3 Pro, you really can't go wrong with that. I've met very few people who have had a bad experience with the Death Adder V3 Pro. But obviously, one caveat with both of the mice, especially with the 4K polling dongle, is the price, which is where the Death Adder V3 Wired comes in, which is on sale for, I believe, $50, $60. It has 8K hertz polling rate. It's even lighter than the wireless version, but obviously it just does have a cable. So if you're willing to stomach the cable, if you're brave enough, you can have a really good performing mouse for pretty piss cheap compared to other top performing mice. Next up is the Deluxe M800 Pro, and this is honestly a mouse. I believe they made a $33.95 version, included some glass gates or something, but it's still that same shell that they've been using for a few years now. It's honestly began to feel pretty outdated compared to, say, the Pulsar X2 Mini. The M800 Pro, it just does not have the same high quality feeling. I haven't tried the newest version, so I could be wrong. Maybe they have massively improved, but I'm gonna go with C tier. It's just not a top recommendation of mine for a wireless mouse. Also gonna move the M4 wireless down there. Now there's the Titan GE Air wireless, which is a mouse probably not many people know about. It is basically just a Korean version of the Cooler Master MM720. And yeah, it's just one of those mice that's a weird shape. It's not that easy to get in the US. You got to pay like over $100 through eBay. There's not really any returns, and it's just a mouse that for 99% of people won't be worth buying. It's not that uniquely good of an experience. Now we have the Viper Mini Signature Edition, which is obviously a controversial one. A lot of people hate it because you just can't buy one for a reasonable price. It's massively scalped on like eBay. And my unit definitely does have some quality issues, specifically with the side buttons that have kind of just been there since day one. But since it's my main mouse, I can't really say it's unusable. But for the $300 price, you'd definitely like to see a few things sharpened up. The whole design with all of the massive holes in it, I've just never been a fan of, but I kind of can't put the mouse down. So I got to acknowledge that it is top tier specifically for fingertip grip. And if you like small shapes for claw grip. Like if you enjoy the Viper Mini, you're going to love this, or you're going to love paying 10 times the price for it. I don't know. But yeah, very good mouse. Next up is the Asus Rog Harpe Ace, which I'll throw in the A tier because in terms of performance, it could very well be based seal of approval tier, but it is just a large mouse. It kind of does have a hollow, cheap feeling. I hate to sound so wishy-washy, but especially at the $150 price point, a mouse just has to have like an it factor, and I really struggle able to see that with the Harpe Ace. It was made in collaboration with AimLab, so there are some like gimmicky Sense LOD tool finder things that you can get through AimLab software. But yeah, the mouse, I just never used it after reviewing it. It just always felt kind of meh at a high price point with good specs. Now the Asus Tough Air, which is a wired mouse from Asus, I believe it came in at like 47 grams or something, had a pretty poor cable if I remember correctly, and it's just an outdated mouse. Maybe you can find it cheap as fuck for like $30 and you'll get some good gaming performance, but not really going to be a top tier recommendation like the Lamzu Atlantis and Atlantis Mini are. I'm going to throw both of these in the based tier. Why not? Lamzu's a company that kind of just came onto the scene last summer with the Atlantis, which was obviously a very close shape to the endgame gear XM1, which they have since released the XM2 Wii version of, but they still have not released the XM2W. So Lamzu came out of nowhere, fulfilled that niche, and then they also made the Mini version. And the Lamzu products are just so unbelievably high quality. They did have some issues with like unevenness of the base, but those have since been addressed. The coating was a weak point, but in the newer batches they are improving the coating, and Lamzu is just clearly a company that wants to make good products. They're affordable at, I believe, $90 for the standard and mini versions. They are making some new mice like the Thorn and the Maya, but those do seem to have gotten delayed, so currently these are your only options from Lamzu. Obviously, just choose whichever size you think is going to work better for you. If you've used an XM1, that's a great reference point. If you want the same size, get the standard. If you want something smaller, get the mini. Really not much more to it. And now we get to Gwolves Mice, specifically the new Gwolves Mice, and for the first ever time, I believe, Gwolves is going to find their way to the top tiers. There's really no other way to put it. The Hot ES 4K, the HTX, they're just top tier mice. Gwolves is getting the mice extremely low in terms of weight, very good in terms of latency, and just besides from Razer, you really don't see a lot of companies implementing 4K hertz polling rate. These are not the cheapest products, but Gwolves does make 1K hertz versions of the mice that are available for $110, like $100 if you use a code. And that was another big problem with the Gwolves. They just did not have their mice readily available, but it seems like something in the last year happened. They have had a big uptick in terms of their actual mouse production, and now they have some great mice that you can actually buy. If you want a mouse that has a bigger hump, higher profile, go with the Hot ES 4K, but if you want something lower profile, say for fingertip, kind of close to the Starlight, but not in identical shape, go with the HTX. They do have their line of fingertip mice as well, which I'm just not as big of a fan of. The specs of the HSK Pro honestly make it out to be like an unbelievable mouse. It has 4K hertz polling rate, it's under 30 grams in terms of weight, it has a scroll wheel, it has side buttons, so you would think it's like a good experienced fingertip grip mouse, but it's really just, it's not all there in the hand. It is an extremely tiny mouse, as you can see, so both side buttons aren't even like the size of my thumb, so it's impossible to differentiate between them, and I just much prefer the shape of a standard sized mouse. So fingertip grip mice, really not for me, but I do have to admit that the HSK Pro is an impressive product. The HSK Plus is a larger version, which you would think it kind of addresses some of the issues I have with the Pro, but I just like it less than the HSK Pro, if that is believable. And the HSK wired version without any side buttons, just complete dog shit, not even worth considering. Now the Fantech Aria, I'm going to say this belongs in either the A or the base tier. I'm going to throw it in the A tier just because I don't use it too much personally, and the egg shape is something that I'm not a big fan of. But if you do like the Orochi, I would say the Razer Orochi is easily the closest comparison, and want something a bit larger, a bit higher quality, definitely go with the Fantech Aria. And the Aria also was one of the first affordable $33.95 mice, and it's just cool to see it stay relevant even after release. It's just a good product, basically. The Bearded Bob GPX, or really just any Bearded Bob mouse mod, is absolutely based. I did take a look at his channel, and it looks like Bearded Bob either stopped uploading or took a break, which is obviously tragic. We need his mouse modding videos to be prevalent as night, but I just, I don't know, maybe there just aren't any mice for him to mod. But big shout out to Bearded Bob. He does some crazy shit to mice. The Dornfinger Vino S, just gonna go in dog shit tier, kind of a irrelevant wired mouse from a few years ago. There was never a wireless version made, but I do think Dornfinger is making some interesting mouse pads, so maybe I'll check those out. The Fnatic Bolt is either gonna be like low B tier, high C tier. Just it was a 3370 generation of mouse. It was a unique shape from Fnatic, but it never really popped off. It was definitely an interesting morph of a few different Zowie mice. It was an interesting shape for claw grip, but It was just nothing that ever caught on for me. It had a really bad coating and side buttons, and it just wasn't enjoyable in the hand compared to something like the GPX, which was the top tier mouse at the time. Okay, now we have the glorious Model O wireless, and I think the standard version definitely just belongs in the D tier. It probably is a bit more affordable now that the O2 is out. And Glorious's mice just really make no sense at this point. The Model O2 was just such an unimpressive mouse that even though it's like technically better than the old version, I want to put it in a lower tier. It literally weighs 1 gram less, and they had the audacity to market it as a lightweight version of the original Model O. They just changed up the shape a bit. Like, for what reason? They changed up the whole design, the button design. It's like they just switched it up, made it a bit more modern, I guess, but it's just still ultimately a mouse not worth buying. They finally threw in a 3395 sensor after they released their 2 group buy mice with 3370s for some reason. Like, they had the Model O Pro, which is unironically like a B tier mouse. It was a 55 gram version of the original Model O with essentially no other changes. So the fact that they released the Model O2, which is like 15 grams heavier, much less focused on performance, and then chose to throw the higher performance sensor in that, it is just, folks, it doesn't make sense from Glorious. And they had another one, the Series 1 Pro. Where the fuck is that? Where is it? Where is it? Here it is, which is also going to go in B tier. That was close to like the Viper Mini shape. It was a new shape from Glorious that they only released through their group buy program and just never touched it again. It was like a 50 gram mouse, small shape, lots of potential. So what does Glorious do? Never fucking touches it again. And now the other old Glorious wired mice, those can literally just go in dog shit tier. Like, you should not be using a Model D or a Model O wired in this day and age. I feel like there's been a pretty strong sentiment shift because I've always been very critical of Glorious, but I used to always get called out for it. People would be like, hey, they're making great budget products. But I feel like the facade is kind of like lifted and people are like, huh, probably better off using a mouse that isn't from Glorious. And their lack of like development on new products, it just shows your money is better spent elsewhere in terms of gaming mice, in my opinion. Also, their wireless mice have pathetic battery life, and that still has not changed. The Hottie S wireless, just the standard non-Hottie S Plus version, is probably going to go in like either B or C tier. Again, it's just not worth buying from Gwolves. It's a 3370 implementation, and it's just not as good as their Hottie S Plus mouse, so not really worth considering. Next up is the Katana Superlight, which was Ninjutso's second mouse, and at first they just could not really figure out a mouse shape to make, so they would copy these old Microsoft mice, and that's what the Katana Superlight is, I believe. Not sure the exact mouse it's based on. Is it the IE 3.0? But I don't know. It's not a good shape in my opinion. It basically only worked for palm grip, and even then it wasn't comfortable. So I mean, it can go in C tier, but it's just not a mouse worth buying. It does have a 3370, and yeah, the Ninjutso Sora is definitely their top option. Now we have some Cooler Master mice. The MM712 I'm going to throw in A tier, similar to the Fantech Aria. I just think it's a good budget small mouse. If you have used the MM710 or 11, it's the exact same shape in a wireless form. In my opinion, it's better quality. It does have a forward sensor position, which I like the experience of. I heard there were some issues with like motion latency though, which I definitely never noticed. I don't know if those have been addressed though, but yeah, in my experience with the optical switches and the good weight, the MM712 was just a solid mouse. It surprised me considering that Cooler Master's mice are generally garbage, like the MM731, which is just going to go in D tier with very little explanation. That was just a terrible shape. It had terrible tech issues at the start. They fixed those, and then I got to realize that the mouse itself was just garbage, even after they fixed the latency. Now the GameSense MVP wireless. Man, this tier list has a lot of mice that are just simply outdated. The MVP wireless was GameSense's version of the Microsoft WMO, and it was cool, it was heavy, and now it's just not really worth considering. I don't even know if they produce it anymore. Next up is going to be the Shroud mouse, the G303 Special Edition that Shroud himself does not use, and I always get a lot of shit because I just don't like the shape of this mouse. There are some people who obviously swear by it. I'm not one of those people. For me, it's definitely just a middle-of-the-range B-tier mouse, even though it is obviously extremely high-quality, good tech from Logitech. It's just like the shape of the mouse makes it a lot less enjoyable for me than lots of other options. And also they did change it up from the original G303 shape, which pissed off a lot of the original users. So really, I feel like this mouse satisfied nobody, aside from a few people who bought it and are trying to cope to justify their purchase. Now we have the Pwnage Symmetrical 2, which is a very similar mouse to the glorious Series 1 Pro, which is essentially a Viper Mini-esque wireless shape that weighs in around 70 grams. It is on a sale for only $80, so it's really not a bad pickup. It has a 3370. It'll be a serviceable wireless mouse, but I just don't think it's as good as some top tier 3395 options that I will get to later. Now the Fantech XD5, which was just a weird ergo from Fantech, so much worse than the Aria in my opinion. It's just a very small ergo. I feel like it was designed for the Asian market and it just did not have any good qualities that I can really recall, but you can watch my review of it, I suppose. The Pulsar X-Lite Wireless, the standard X-Lite, not the one that's coming up, the X-Lite V3. I feel like this just belongs in B tier. It was a good wireless ergo for a while, but once the Death Adder V3 Pro came out, it was very much so outclassed as like the top tier ergo option. The side buttons are really bad, but I have a sample version of the X-Lite V3, which definitely did improve on the side buttons. It has a full solid shell, better tech, so that's definitely the mouse to look out for. But the X-Lite Wireless, you might be able to find a good deal on it, but just not something I'm a huge fan of. The SteelSeries Aerox 3 Wireless, this can go into C tier. It's a very low profile shape. Some people enjoy it for claw grip, but again, it's just one of these mice that's outdated. It has a 3335 sensor. It's just not worth your money, folks, and it was very creaky in my experience, but that might just be like copy to copy variants. The Final Mouse Air 58, it's just going to go in dog shit in the sense that you shouldn't buy it. Like a fresh Air 58, it's not really going to be something I would recommend buying at this point, especially since the Final Mouse Ultralight X is going to come with a large size, I believe. So you're going to be able to get that size, probably literally half the weight, in wireless form. Why would you get an Air 58? Next up, we have the Roccat Burst Core and the Burst Pro. I talked about the Burst Pro already, and the Burst Core is just a $30 budget version of the shape with a rubber cable, and I think it had black Teflon skates. So it's just like a budget version. It was cheaper, but at this point, the better version is so cheap that this one's kind of just garbage in comparison. Speaking of garbage, the Cox CM600, just a very tiny egg shape similar to the really old Zowie Miko, I believe, and yeah, it's just not a good mouse, followed up by the Darmoshark N1, which is another mouse that is terrible. So we just have a few mice here that are not even worth talking about because they're so bad and outdated, but of course I have reviews posted if you are interested. And wow, the Razer Death Adder V2 Mini, a shape that just did not work whatsoever. It's either going to be D tier or dog shit, honestly. Yeah, it's going to go in dog shit because the shape was just so scaled down, curvy, uncomfortable. The entire mouse was just basically a problem, one of my most negative reviews. I feel like if they scaled down the Death Adder V3 Pro, which has a bit more natural, like basic of a shape, I guess, that could work very well. But the V2 Mini was just too small and it was terrible. If you're using one, you probably have really small hands and bad mouse taste. The Death Adder V2, I mean, I guess like the V2 Pro is still a solid like either C or B tier mouse, because if you do like the old Death Adder shape, you obviously can't get that anymore. It still does have good tech. However, the weight on the V2 is going to be a lot higher than the V3. In my opinion, I don't enjoy the shape as much, and just the all-around experience is better on the newer products, but it is still kind of relevant because of the old Death Adder shape. Okay, next up is going to be Zowie Mice. First, we have the EC2 wireless. I believe they have an EC1 wireless as well, but aside from that, you're just gonna have to get the wired C series. But the wireless EC2 is very expensive. It does have a 3370, even though that's not like an issue. It's not a poor sensor implementation. In fact, they have like a huge dongle for better connectivity, and it's a fine wireless mouse experience. It is $150, but I mean, I think Zowie realized they're the only people who can make Zowie wireless mice, so they can kind of just charge whatever they want. And Zowie Simps basically have no other option. You just gotta get it from them if you want the true Zowie experience. And yeah, in all seriousness, it is a really good high-performing mouse. It's going to be high quality, but it is a bit on the heavier side. I would recommend the Death Adder V3 Pro over it for most people, and unless you're somebody who has just been using an EC2 or an EC1 forever and just want to upgrade to a wireless version that's exactly the same, I think there are options that make more sense. But you can't deny that Zowie put a quality product out there. People are just mad that it was outdated and took a few years extra to release, but I don't know what they were expecting. Aside from that, I would say the Zowie mice belong in the A tier for the wired C-series versions. I'm not a huge hater of wired mice. Some of these Zowie shapes like the ZA and S2, like there just aren't necessarily good clones that are going to offer similar experiences, so you might as well just get it from Zowie, like $70 for a wired mouse. I don't think that's egregious. The FK series is just the one that I could not get behind. I think that there are a lot of options in terms of a flat, low-profile mouse that make a lot more sense, so I'll throw that one in the B tier. But yeah, ultimately, Zowie is still at the top of the mouse game. There are obviously lots of pros using their wireless mice, and I don't know what it is. Like, it's not that they're objectively better performance, it's just they're what people are used to, and that holds a lot of value in the mouse scene. Next up is the GOAT. I mean, it's hard to say that the GPX is anything aside from one of the greatest, most revolutionary mice of all time, but it's also fucking old. It is well over 2.5 years old, coming up on 3 years in November. Logitech has to make a new mouse. They just trolled everybody by releasing a headset, making everybody think it was going to be a mouse. And yeah, I don't know what to say about the GPX. Everybody knows about it by this point. There's nobody who's watching this video and is like, wow, the G Pro X Superlight, I should check that one out. It's a fucking amazing mouse. And that's all I got to say about it. But it's surprising that it's never like seemingly gone on a big sale. Like you can pick up the old G Pro Wireless for like $2, but the GPX, it's still close to that $150 price point in the US at least. The old G Pro Wireless, just dog shit tier. Like why would you buy a mouse from 2018? Are you really convincing yourself that that is your best option? It's just insane to me. G203, G305, these are mice that have kind of just fallen down the cliff as I've made more and more of these tier lists. I would say like a wired G203 with a shitty rubber cable. Yeah, it's still an option for $30, but I don't know. I don't recommend it as much as I once did. The G305 is still kind of the go-to for just a piss cheap budget mouse. I would say that the Razer Orochi is a good alternative to that as well. But yeah, there still are these mass-produced cheap Logitech mice that are going to be good for gaming. It's just that by the modern standards, they're just not up to par. Speaking of another mouse that just fits those shoes perfectly, the Logitech G402. If it wasn't for Mongrel using this mouse in Fortnite, I don't think anybody would talk about it ever. It's really just a slightly stripped down G502 in terms of features. It has a really old sensor, and it was a fine mouse when I used it. It's obviously heavy, large, bad skates, bad cable, but yeah, it's just the Logitech G402. Now we have the G502, which definitely has to be at least a tier above the G402. Never mind, I made an executive decision to throw them both in dog shit because I realized the G502X exists, which is a more modern version. So really, there's no point in using the old e-waste version of the G502. The modern wired version, I believe, is somewhere around like 87 grams, while the wireless versions are still in the very low 100s, but they just have more modern features, obviously optical switches. Is it a better sensor? I think it might be a slightly improved sensor, nothing you're really going to notice in the real world though. And yeah, one thing with the G502 is even compared to mice like the Basilisk, just any large style mouse like that, I do feel like I can aim well with it and just perform well despite the weight when I use a higher sense with it. So it is a mouse that I just feel like is pretty solid, but the old G502s, not worth considering, even though they might be on sales. G Pro Hero, just gotta throw that right next to the G203. Now there's the HyperX Pulsefire Haste. They did come out with a Pulsefire Haste 2 and a wired version. The wired version actually has 8K hertz polling rate, and I feel like for the price, that's probably an interesting mouse. I have only tried the wireless version though, and the wireless version honestly did not impress me compared to the original Pulsefire Haste. It's literally the exact same with a slightly more solid shell and the 3395 sensor upgrade, so it is a slightly better sensor on paper, but the wireless version for like $90 now, I believe it costs, it just was not impressive enough to really be worth it. Now the Pwnage Ultra Custom Symmetrical. This was Pwnage's first mouse, a very old mouse and just a pretty poor mouse, not worth buying with today's standards, but the Pwnage Symm 2 is still a slightly better mouse. The Gwolves Mice, the the wired one, it's not a dog shit mouse, but once again, it's going to go into the dog shit tier just because there's so many newer versions of the Hot ES that are going to be better buys. Same thing goes with the Hot EM, which they kind of have abandoned. There are no 4K versions of the Hot EM shape. It seems like Gwolves has just gone on to bigger and better things. Same thing with the Gwolves Skoll. Maybe they should make an ergo mouse. That could be interesting. Oh, the Hello Kitty mouse. That just going to go in the dog shit tier. That's a very rare mouse I found on Etsy. Roccat Kane 200. Once again, I think this is going to go into the dog shit tier. That's just pretty sure it's a Minecraft mouse, just a literal like hunk of brick in the hand, and not much good to say about it. The Cone Pure Ultra, though, has a lot of potential. If they came out with a modern wireless version, literally the identical shape, it could be a really good mouse for aggressive claw grip players, but that's really just where the mouse stands. The wired version, I wouldn't recommend buying at this point, but people who have used it in the past just know it's a really unique shape. But knowing Roccat, if they ever do make it wireless, it'll probably be over 100 grams with RGB shooting out of the mouse. It won't even make sense. The Xtrfy M42, speaking of a mouse that does not make sense, I feel like it's a really good shape, a good idea with the interchangeable shells, but they just won't make an updated wireless version of it. The standard wireless version with a 3370, over $100, with the holes in the shell, not great quality clicks. It's just really not a mouse that I feel like is at the best of Xtrfy's capabilities. They could easily make a pro version of the shape, and then that could just be an interesting mouse that could either be A or base tier, I'd imagine. But yeah, the standard wired version, probably not worth considering. Just gonna throw the M4 wired in there for the same reason. The Matar mouse, just some literal garbage OEM mouse going in the dog shit tier. The HK Gaming Mira M. Man, HK Gaming used to make mice. Do they even make keyboard stuff anymore? Somebody let me know. But yeah, HK Gaming's mice were absolutely dismal. That includes the Naos M, which still might hold the record for just the cheapest shitty mouse feeling ever. It's a Zowie S2 inspired shape that really just should be outlawed. I should stop talking about it and not even give it attention. Next is the Cooler Master MM710, which is just the older wired version of the MM712, so really not a mouse worth buying anymore. It was notoriously creaky and poor quality. I mean, it was just a really cheap, lightweight mouse. You weren't expecting best of the best performance, but yeah, in terms of build quality, I would say that was the biggest issue. But yeah, if you are interested in the same shape, let's say you have the mouse but you want to upgrade to wireless, I would go with the MM712, no doubt. The MM720, kind of the same situation, except there is not a wireless alternative. Some of the poorest click feeling I have ever felt on a mouse. It's just a really weird mouse, extremely short in terms of length. It has a ring finger rest, and it's just a unique shape. Like, your hand is not going to feel the same on this mouse compared to any other mouse. It's kind of like a glove, but it's also pretty shit, so not a huge fan of it personally. Now we have the Wise Owl OGM Pro, a mouse that went under a lot of people's radars because it was a China release, but I think since then they've kind of gotten out to the US market a bit, and this is essentially just an ergo mouse with a 3395 sensor, but it has a Nordic MCU, a very good sensor implementation, and it's just a mouse that when I put my hands on it, it caught me by surprise. It is in the low 70 gram range, I believe. I would say if you're in the market for a large, affordable, like high quality ergo, it's at least something worth considering. I would personally probably take it over the Pulsar X Lite wireless, like the standard versions. And yeah, just for an unknown Chinese brand, basically, it was a mouse that impressed me a lot. Next up is going to be the Vaxee NP01. The NP01 is definitely my least favorite Vaxee shape. The NP01S, in my opinion, is just much better, so I'm going to throw the NP01 in the B tier, then I'll throw the NP01S in the A tier. Vaxee is a company that is pretty late to wireless. They obviously released the XE in wireless form, but like Zowie, they can't seem to put out all of their mice as wireless. The NP01S has a very interesting asymmetrical, like nimble feeling shape. It's very easy to control. The curvature makes sense. It's not too aggressive, and it just doesn't feel like an ergo mouse as much as it does an asymmetrical mouse, if that makes sense. But the NP01 is just a very bulky mouse. I do know some people who palm grip, though, like that shape. And yeah, I just really hope Vaxee comes out with wireless versions, but there's really nothing wrong with their wired mice. The Pwnage Ultra Custom, this is the Ergo, just going to go in the same place as the Ultra Custom Symm, like just not worth considering at this point. The Razer Viper 8K, I actually don't know where to put this mouse. Probably C tier, could be B tier. It's definitely not as good as the Death Adder V3 wired 8K, so I feel like they should make a Viper V2 wired 8K. And the reason for that is with the old Viper, you still have the side buttons on both sides, the weird side grips, the worse optical switches compared to the new ones, worse stock skates, and really it's just not an updated version, but it is still the 8K hertz polling rate, so it does offer very good performance, usually on sale, so you can pick one up. I just really hate the Viper, the old Viper wired experience. Now we have two just straight garbage mice from SteelSeries. Man, just looking at these, all of the SteelSeries mice are like 5 years old. Are they ever going to release a new mouse? Let me know what you think in the comments below. The Razer Viper Mini. This mouse has literally been in base tier for every single tier list. But folks, this is shocking. The Viper Mini has been discontinued by Razer. So they're no longer producing it. It's no longer going to be on like the $20 sales, or at least they aren't currently producing it. You can obviously still find them like in every store, but on Amazon there is no Prime delivery option, which is really what I consider a discontinued product. So yeah, honestly, I don't know what to do with the Viper Mini. It's an old mouse, and now that you can't really get it for the extremely cheap prices, it's not worth going out of your way to buy, but it's still probably the most iconic budget mouse ever. It still holds its own today. Still a top performer. So I mean, I guess it can stay in the base tier, but it's just very disappointing to see Razer no longer producing it. Now, what is this? The Viper Ultimate. I would say this belongs in C tier. I mean, it could be argued into B tier. It could also go in dog shit tier with the old G Pro Wireless. Yeah, I think that's where I like it the most, because it's like, just get a Viper V2 Pro. Don't get a Viper Ultimate. What's wrong with you? Unless you're a left-handed person, in which case there is something wrong with you. Now we have the Gwolves Skoll Mini and the standard size Skoll, some mice that just have not been updated in years. Fun fact, when the Skoll Mini released, I believe it was one of the first full-size mice to be below 50 grams. But yeah, at this point, it's really not worth buying. Maybe you can find one on like a sale for $30 on Amazon, and at that point, it would be worth putting in the D tier. Next up is going to be the Final Mouse Ultralight 2, which definitely sits at a weird place in the market. I mean, it probably belongs in C tier, but is it a mouse worth buying? Definitely not at the stock price. If you could find one like lightly used for $100, yeah, it's still a good small mouse. It obviously is wired with 500 hertz polling rate, but it's a mouse that I enjoyed a lot originally, though. I mean, now I don't know if I would really recommend anybody to go for it with what Final Mouse has coming out. Now we have the Starlight, which had always gone into the base tier. But like I just said, with the Ultralight X coming out, being lighter, better tech, just all around better, I don't think it makes sense to have the Starlight at the top of the list anymore, because it's clear that it's going to be improved. So yeah, with the Ultralight X drop less than a month away, I really don't think it makes sense to buy a new Starlight, especially if you're going to be paying over retail. I just literally can't think of a single reason. But when the mice released, they were pretty revolutionary, like almost 20 grams lighter than the GPX. They really were ahead of the mark. I wonder if Final Mouse is going to do that again. Obviously, the drops were not free of quality issues, but yeah, I do feel like the Starlights did help out the mouse scene a lot in terms of low weights and companies being willing to use materials that aren't just plastic, even though clearly that has not caught on too much yet. But yeah, the Starlight, especially the small size, is just one of my favorite mice for fingertip, because I have always loved the Ultralight 2 size. Now we have the XM2 Wii, which I am going to throw in the base tier, and I mean, endgame gear is just absolutely trolling with the XM2W. It's still, at the time of making this video, has not been released. That's been well over a year since they released the pre-order. So they came out with an entirely different version with a 3370. This is available, I think, for $80 in the US, and it's a wireless XM1. It is basically what people asked for. It's not as good as the standard W version that's gonna come out at some point, maybe, but it's a mouse you can actually fucking buy. So that's what I would go for from Endgame Gear. Apparently they have a mini wired mouse that's going to be announced soon, but I mean, I don't fucking know about that. It's Endgame Gear. And yeah, with the standard wired XM1, it probably just belongs in B tier. I wouldn't really recommend spending $70 on it at this point, when you can spend $10 more and get the wireless experience. But honestly, you are your own god. If you want the wired mouse, feel free. Now the Atompalm Hydrogen, which was always on the tier list as a mouse that was just seemingly never going to exist. And then it came out and it was so like unbelievably bad and disappointing. That's really all I have to say about it. And they only did one drop, which I missed out on. So I had to buy the mouse secondhand from a viewer. Shout out to whoever that was. And yeah, just checked the website and you can't even buy it. So it just seemed like that was kind of the ultimate flop. Maybe they are working on the issues to make it better before selling it again. But yeah, man, the Atompalm Hydrogen, that was a waste of hope for a few years. Now we have the Xtrfy M1K and M2K, two fingertip grip mice that are actually discontinued. If you somehow never heard of Xtrfy, they are two brothers who basically just wanted to make the lightest gaming mouse. They chose carbon fiber. The M2K has a scroll wheel. The M1K does not. Neither of the mice have side buttons, and they both have this pretty shitty rubber cable. But they are, without a doubt, unique mice. They have Japanese Omrons, 8K hertz polling rate, and they kind of just are the most premium mice out there. The price that they command, which is like over $300. So you would certainly expect that. But yeah, they are kind of gimmick mice, obviously not going to have mass appeal, and I don't know what their future plans are. They might be making a wireless version. They got to be doing something, though. I know Xtrfy's not just done with mice, because they have something interesting going with fingertip grip mice. Now we have the SteelSeries Prime Wireless. This is probably the most recent release from SteelSeries besides the like Aerox 5 and 9. It's their ergo releases. Very sharp, weird ergo shapes using the 3335 sensor, so just nothing that I'm really going to recommend, especially when there are so many solid ergo options towards the top of the list. But yeah, I don't even know if there's a massive enough sale to make that product worth it. The Roccat Kone Pro Air, I'm going to throw this in the B tier. Did seem to have some notorious issues with the scroll wheel, but all around it was not a bad mouse. It came in at like 75 grams, very large ergo shape, big thumb rest, solid clicks, solid side buttons. It was like a solid mouse. Could honestly be argued into the A tier, but at this point it is getting a little bit outdated, just like every Roccat product basically. I did just check Amazon. The Kone Pro Air is only $50, which is actually a ridiculously cheap price, so definitely towards the top of B tier now. I mean, if you're interested in it, I would say go for it at $50. Next up are the Vaxee XD wired and wireless. I would say that getting the wireless version of the Vaxee XD makes a lot more sense. Which I would say it's an A tier mouse. Vaxee is an interesting wireless implementation. They have this thing called competition mode, and when you enable it, it makes the 1000 hertz polling rate just feel like it's higher polling rate. It's very interesting how the sensor implementation actually feels like a step above most other 3395 implementations. Honestly, with the way I'm describing it, it might belong in base tier. I'm just not a huge fan of the shape. It is on the clunkier side, kind of a morph between a Zowie FK1 and a G Pro Superlight. It is a very good shape for stability, though. I definitely aim well with it. It's just not my #1 option personally, but I would say it's a top tier wireless mouse, so I guess it can go in the base tier. Now there is the wired Mz1, which I had always had extremely bad creaking with. I would say this fits more with the C tier mice compared to D tier mice, and Rocket Jump Ninja is the GOAT after all. But again, they should make a wired 8K version maybe, or a wireless Pro version. That would just be a lot more in line with today's standards than the OG Mz1 wired. Now there is the Razer Orochi V2, which is not going to be the #1 mouse in terms of gaming performance, even though the latency on the clicks is surprisingly low. But yeah, the quality of the Orochi did not blow me away. With use, the click quality noticeably deteriorated, but it is a good smaller mouse. If you have small hands, you might be able to pull off a claw or even a palm grip, but for most people, it's going to be some type of fingertip or hybrid claw grip. And yeah, for the price it's at, it's really good. It does use batteries, but it can be as low as 64 grams with a AAA battery, and it's just a very solid budget end mouse. I mean, I guess it could be B tier depending on who you ask. The Vaxee Outset AX, gonna throw this in B tier. The AX is a shape that just never worked for me personally. It's a very heavy mouse, and it's kind of like if you took the Zowie EC, you like smudge it, make it a bit smaller, and then extend the hump out, make it way higher profile. That's the best way to explain it, honestly. It is a very high quality feeling product, but at the weight and shape, I just couldn't make it work. If they release a wireless version, I would obviously give it another shot, but it is for people who play palm grip almost exclusively, and if you play something like CS or Valorant, you just want a ton of stability, then go for it. But I really do like Vaxee's overall catalog. I just hope they make it wireless. Now we got the Tenz Starlight. I guess I'll throw that next to a normal Starlight. Actually, no, I'm going to throw it in dog shit. Maybe I'll get a few comments from people who skipped to the end of the video. Like, why is the Tenz one dog shit? Now the Razer Naga, that's a dog shit mouse. I mean, just look at the amount of buttons on the side. Don't really need to explain it. The Vancer Gretxa is a mouse that's pretty outdated at this point. It was kind of an alternative to the Starlight. When it first dropped, it was this mysterious Chinese mouse. But since then, Vancer has made a few more mice. I would say the Gretxa was probably their best option, like when it released at the time. But now it's like a 70-gram 3370, pretty low quality version of the Starlight medium shape. You just don't need to buy it when the Viper V2 Pro exists. Next up is PMM, aka Piranha Mouse Mods. They've been in the scene for a long time doing 3D printed mice, and I'm going to throw it in the B tier. I mean, nothing crazy exceptional in my opinion. Some people find a 3D printed mouse that really works for them, but over time they have started to improve the internals, which you actually cannot see from this angle. They've started putting GPX and Viper V2 Pro internals inside some of the models, which is a huge improvement compared to the G305 internals they had been using forever. The click quality on 3D printed mice just still sucks all across the board of the many mice I've tried at this point, but Piranha Mouse Mods is probably selling the best pre-builts out there. There are just tons of shapes and shit that you can just get from them. Now the Ninjutso Origin 1X, very outdated mouse. They could honestly make a new version, throw in a 3395. But yeah, the original version has a 3335, nothing too sharp in terms of tech or quality. Just a pretty forgettable mouse. The Quadraclicks RBT, this is the pseudoscience mouse. It is scientifically proven to reduce your odds of getting carpal tunnel because they put like the clicks on top of the mouse. It's just a very weird thing. It sucked. You were supposed to like click it with your knuckles. It was basically unusable for gaming. Now the Dharma Shark N3, not to be confused with the M3, which is the Air 58 clone. Honestly, since I don't have that on the list, I am going to say that this is the M3, and I'll throw it in the A tier because it's basically a $50 Air 58 with a 3395 sensor. Obviously, just a random Chinese mouse, like it's not going to be the best of the best. For example, the click feeling on my unit was really poor, but I mean, I would recommend watching my review if you're interested. A pretty banger budget mouse. Now we have the Ironcat HPC02m Pro, another Chinese mouse, and I don't know where to throw this one. Maybe the C tier, because it is very cool in that you can adjust the switches. It has hot swap switches basically, and in the box you get all of the switches provided. It's a customizable mouse, but it's just not great in terms of performance. I do think it was $150, so yeah, it costs a lot of money for a mouse that's ultimately not good, not going to be worth it, but you can swap the switches out, so that's pretty innovative. Okay, now the Death Adder V2 X Hyperspeed. I'm just going to throw this next to the other Death Adder V2 I had on this list. Now the Pulsar X2, X2 Mini, and the X2 Boardsy edition. I mean, we could already throw that one in based. It is, of course, just the standard X2 shape and tech, but it does have Huano blue shell pink dot switches, the based zebra design, and a better improved coating, which was really the main issue on the standard X2 and X2 Mini, which I do believe are discontinued. They are not going to be making any new versions. The last version that came out was the clear one, and they're going to instead focus on the esports editions of their mice, which are going to be 4K hertz polling rate, I believe, and the X2H, which is going to be a ZA style hump. But yeah, a lot of people know about the X2 and the X2 Mini by now. They were one of the first major 3395 mouse releases. The original batches were obviously plagued by some click quality issues. But yeah, I was always a fan of them at the $95 price point. Both versions coming in at the low 50s is a pretty respectable weight. The X2 Mini was one of my favorite small mice to use for fingertip. But yeah, you're not going to be able to buy them anymore really because they're focusing on their newer improved mice. So that's kind of that with the Pulsar X2. The Vancer, Castor, and Pollux, these are very disappointing mice. I'm honestly going to put them in C tier. I just got the newer versions of them. I'm going to have reviews up for the Pro versions by now, but they're just very uninspiring mice. They're essentially the same as the standard version I reviewed around 6 months ago, which were not good. I have not noticed any quality improvements, not really any noticeable tech improvements either. It's just like, wow. I know I might seem like a mouse reviewing robot, but when products are that boring compared to like elite stuff that I have on my desk and low quality, it's just not very exciting to review them. So to the people who've been asking, I'll make a video in like a week probably, reviewing those two mice. And now last but not least is going to be the Ninjutso Sora, which I'm going to throw in the A tier. And the reason for that is this is a small, like mini XM1 style mouse. It comes in around 47 grams. It originally had some sensor issues, but those have since been addressed. But the thing with this mouse is I just was never able to enjoy it more than the X2 Mini or the Lamzu Atlantis Mini. Those were both just better shapes for me. But I mean, it's totally interchangeable. These are all 3395 small mice that are claw grip focused. I would say the Sora is going to be the worst for fingertip out of the bunch. But if you are just looking for a small claw grip style mouse, the Sora is a great option below 50 grams, below $100. And yeah, I mean, I think that is all for the updated all-encompassing gaming mouse tier list featuring over 125 mice. This was an absolute marathon. I believe I kept it under an hour, which was a better time than I had in mind. But yeah, feel free to look at the list. I feel like this is the first time that I'm not going to make any post-list adjustments. I feel like I am in tune with the mouse market right now. If you disagree, I don't know what you're on really. As is usually the case, anything A tier or above is what I consider the elite of the elite. There's probably some good mice that could be argued into A tier in the B tier, but anything C tier or below, I really doubt is worth your time, your hard-earned time. Time is money. Money's also money. If you're interested in any of the products, I will leave them linked in the description below. Also, believe it or not, I have full reviews posted for every one of these mice, so if you feel like I didn't go into enough detail or you just want more info on a mouse, just type in like Bugha Starlight review and then just watch the full review. It's truly a beautiful feature that YouTube has for us. But yeah, honestly, my brain is fried. I usually start these tier lists in the morning, finish it at night, but I've just done this in one sitting. I don't know, I'm just oozing with passion for gaming mice. And that's going to be all for this video. Make sure to let me know what you think of the tier list below. I'll leave everything linked and also leave a link to the tier list completed because some people like that. But yeah, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and that's going to be all. Peace out.